So now it's time for the last presentation for today. And that is from Ronei, Clécio, Mocellin. And the title I have here is Thinking with Your Hands on the Mode of Existence of Chemical Objects in the Enlightenment Century. And I see a different title here, but it says, Is Chemistry a Technoscience? So whichever it is, take it away, Clécio.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. To start, I'd like to thank the regional committee for organizing this symposium. For it's my plan, it's a subject topic of infancy, according to Dr. Chammer. Let's go. Saying its alchemical past, chemistry has always worked with and on materials in such a way that its history is also a material history. Materials have shaped chemists and their science by stimulating the founding or reorganization of disciplinary fields, epistemic communities, instrumentation, cognitive representation, experimental, and educational practices. Over the past 2 centuries, chemists and the chemical industry have, in a sense, come to play a role as architect of both matter and society. Therefore, the material entities that chemists have produced and produce until now are participate in both human history and the history of our planet. Consequently, we can consider that new materials and social configuration guide chemists and their effort to move forward with some matters of investigation while neglecting others, in such a way that the products of chemistry integrate, besides cognitive values that are pertinent to the field's economical interest and demands of social, medical, military, or environmental nature. So, does this intermingling of chemical reasoning and materiality, as well as the artificial character of its products, make chemistry originally a technoscientific science? Chemical knowledge has, without a doubt, a particularity, because its locus lies between science and technology, theoretical and practical, abstract and concrete. It does not find its affiliation only in the conceptual aspect, but, on the contrary, its roots lie in the Baconian tradition of makers of knowledge. Besides, I would like to point out that I postulate here a general thesis about the cognitive identity of chemistry. It is a case of admitting that the relation of chemical entities and their properties are the result of a material emergence. Here, I keep in mind only that in the emergentist perspective, the properties of a specified level of materiality, though derived from an inferior level, are exclusive to this level. Even if chemical properties emerged from a more basic physical universe subatomic, this did not imply that they were reduced to the properties of these physical entities. Finally, I consider that this perspective allows for a solid justification that chemistry is an autonomous science, both in epistemological and ontological terms, being that emergentist admits an ontological and epistemological pluralism. Therefore, chemical entities, chemical bonds, or molecular orbitals exist within an ontological and epistemological scope pertaining to chemistry. I agree with those philosophers who have used the term technoscience to denote the emergence of a new kind of organization of scientific research. But, as Banchot Vincent points out, it is necessary to stop invoke terms such as revolution or new paradigm to impose a direction to history. Technoscience is less a historical moment and more a process which connects several history. That is why we can find traces of it in a distant past, well before the rise of the term. Certainly, contemporary chemistry participates in certain convergence between science and technology for the purpose of producing material objects that will serve primarily an economical and market logic. However, if we consider that chemistry is a technoscience, we must demonstrate that it is not just a matter of pointing out that there is a predominance of technology over pure science, and the orientation of scientific research in favor of specified social sectors. It is a question of a more precise sense that chemistry has always been a hybrid between science and technology, without making the former a subordinated of the latter. I will thus try to highlight some hybrid and transgressive characteristics that have repercussion on anthropological, ontological, and epistemological issues, as well as identify chemistry originally as technoscience. Chemistry is a scientific activity that, historically, has never separated what Bruno Latour defines as the inside, the laboratories, and the outside, which cover everything from the process of recruiting new professionals to the promotion of specified research, or yet the social assimilation of its products. Thus, here, I will consider chemistry as a technoscience only with the purpose of highlight its hybrid characteristics. It deals with knowledge concerning the material world, which emerge for complex interaction between science and technology, laboratories and the industry, nature and society. Chemistry, then, represents an emblematic case of the manner in which we see the term technoscience, meaning it creates the objects themselves that it investigates, at times for technological innovation, medical, agricultural, etc., through there is no concrete separation between science and technology, but a dynamic interaction between them. Besides, analysis of the implication of this technochemistry are fundamental, not only within the boundaries of philosophy or history of chemistry, but also for a substantial improvement in pedagogical models applied in teaching both subjects. More precisely, when attributing a technoscientific character to the construction of the chemical science and its industry, I think to highlight above all its transgressive nature. We can identify this transgression phenomenon according to three perspectives. From an anthropological point of view, chemistry defies the great divisions of our culture, such as the ones between natural and artificial, nature and culture, the inert and the living, the pure and the impure. From an epistemological point of view, chemistry equally defies the division established between science and technique, between making and knowing, between representing and intervening. Finally, from an ontological point of view, besides manipulating material entities that are already known, chemists create new ones, define the division between realism and positivism as well. The ontology of these material objects is made explicit from things chemists consider to exist and that allow them to act, which also demands identification and classification. In this outlook, the work about and with material entities bring chemists closer to what Ian Haken classified as entity realism, while pushing them farther away from a theory realism as well as metaphysical realism. These transgressions reinforce thus why it is pertinent to view chemical knowledge as a technoscientific. By association, the chemical science to technoscience and to the study of certain kinds of material entities, elements, ions, molecules, we also avoid proposing a general definition of what chemistry is. After all, the definition of chemistry varies in space and time in such a way that there is no definition of chemistry that is capable of embracing the research made by chemists and alchemists throughout history. With regard to materials, one can ask oneself about their mechanical, thermodynamical, electromagnetical, biological, and ecological properties. But among all, there is one property in particular, the one that refers to chemical reaction. The chemical properties of the matter can be characterized in three axes which have constituted throughout time.
Excuse me, 5 more minutes.
Okay. What chemists do? First, the methods, analysis, synthesis, the measure, amount of materials, currently the mole, and the language, which indicates composition and molecular structure. Analysis has always been one of the main objectives of chemists, which led to the development of separation and purification techniques. Synthesis consists in the production of the new substance, a metal that produced some hundred substances in 19th century, but that currently produce millions of new substances. This number certainly represents an increase of knowledge, of chemical knowledge about matter, but also point to a substantial growth in the lake of knowledge we have about material entities that can be part of human societies and natural environments. How can one now manage and legislate over this immense amount of chemical substance? Certainly, it is up to the chemists to construct the knowledge about the entities they produce. However, the change in context in which these entities will be present after they leave the laboratories and the chemical industries calls for the convergence of other science, such as biological and human, but also the science concerning non-cognitive values, such as social and ethical. Thus, if we can believe the products of chemistry should be considered a pharmaca, it is because the relationship between chemistry and society is essentially ambivalent. That is, if a chemical substance can represent the solution to certain problems, there is no guarantee that it cannot become the cause of new difficulties and complications. Therefore, besides the compliance of chemistry professionals to cognitive values associated with the research, the legislation established by the public power to regulate the production and commercialization of chemical products must be strict. Otherwise, a substance produced by chemical science can become a dangerous poison. For conclusion, technoscience, as we know, is a polysemic term. But the history of chemistry and its industry offer precisely elements for us to understand technoscientific practices that constitute chemical science itself. So I would like to point out three aspects of this technoscientific science and some of its products. Firstly, the more general aspects that led us to identify chemistry as technoscientific is to point out the hybrids that exist between chemistry and society. Second, with that, to consider that the modern societal necessities, material, environmental, and human, with chemistry, in an effort to build a more harmonious relationship, being that it will be long and maybe indissoluble. That is, to consider that the capillarity of chemistry in societies and in environmental and the imprevisibility and essential uncertainty of the behavior of chemical entities in multiple contexts. Finally, considering chemistry and its products as a technoscientific may contribute to ethical reflection concerning with the production and creation of a new substance that may become a part of the live world. As a consequence, I understand that chemistry has an epistemic identity which make it technoscientific without confusing the participation of this science in technoscientific programs that are commercially oriented. For this reason, I attempt to highlight here some hybrid and transgressive characteristic that identity chemistry as technoscience. Thanks, muchas gracias, muito obrigado a todos.
Thank you very much, Professor Mocellin. So we have about 9 or 10 minutes for questions. I see that Michelle and Jesus posted a question. We'll start with Michelle.
Okay, yes, this was a very interesting talk. I was wondering, and you've made some really interesting distinctions. I was just wondering if pharmacy is more obviously a technoscience than chemistry, or you might want to distinguish between pure chemistry and applied chemistry, I'm not sure. Just what are your reactions to pharmacy as opposed to chemistry? That's all.
Yes, I think it's the same, it's similar. And I use here the concept from the human science. I think the notion is not a concept, technoscience, I think, because it's very plural, your sense. I think it's very interesting to think about the chemistry or the pharmacy, etc. But to understand the connection between various actors, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question is from Jesus, and then there's another question after that from Olympia. So Jesus.
Okay, thank you for the interesting presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, my question is also because I don't understand very well why the fact that the chemist creates new substances defies the division between the realism and positivism.
In general, I think the compromise with the reality of the words, I think create a new substance is an act. Is not a discovery. Is to create. So I don't know. I think is a tension between creation and discovery. So I think that gap between realism and positivism, I think the act of create a new substance is a convergence and the two parts. I think the theory and the reality. I don't know. It helps. But thank you for your question, Jesus.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Olympia.
Well, thank you, Ronei. Very, very clear your talk. I think that you point to very, very interesting points. And if you say that chemistry is a technoscience that is in the some of a middle point between science and technology, and it's kind of a hybrid, has a transgressive nature. You say that it defies many conceptual divisions, previous conceptual divisions. That is the novelty of has a novelty of taking as ethical connotations as essential. That uncertainty is essential. I mean, there are a lot of tensions that you are pointing out very well, and and I always wonder whether these are tensions because our thought and our concept of science, our philosophy of science, and in particular our concept of science in general, is modeled with looking at physics. So we designed a kind of a picture of science that is not adequate for chemistry. So I always wonder what would happen if I'm thinking in a counterfactual history, philosophical history. What happened if if philosophy of science were modeled with the image of chemistry? Perhaps all these things would be natural, and physics would be unnatural. So sometimes, have you thought about this? I'm trying to find people who develop this idea.
Yes. Thanks, Olympia. I think the central position of chemistry and the connection between not the nature in the concept way, but the environmental, I think, the ambient and the culture, the society. I think to think of, from chemistry and the central position is a very important opportunity to think about society and science and institution and scientists, etc. I think is a very, so the notion of technoscience, in my point of view, is a convergence, the various actors, so the society, science. So I think the chemistry and philosophy of chemistry, or the techno-chemistry, they refer to the activities derived from the chemical experiment. So, which in a fundamental way and based on a superficial set of the values transform the reality in which we live. So I think in considering chemistry as technochemistry or technoscientists, technoscience, in my point of view, we open a number of the issues that be expanded methodological, sociological, historically, etc. I think. Thanks a lot, Olympia.
Thank you so much.